Hello, hello, hello. My chick, hello.
So, good evening and welcome to today's Asset Colloquium by Dr. Asmita Redij. You'll find, of course, today's colloquium very interesting because it deals with education. More interesting because it deals with, child's education. And maybe even much more, most interesting, I must say, because it also deals with education of children, marginalized children from remotest part of maybe the state. So everything brings education, children, and the location, everything brings its own challenges. As the speaker mentions, in India, a significant fraction of students from tribal marginalized regions still struggle to reach the school. So we think that taking more and more children to school itself is a big challenge. But then, as she rightly puts in, but that struggle doesn't actually end in reaching there, which we think if you can take the children to the school, then the problem is solved. And they said the school further continue to alienate them as the classroom doesn't discourse, actually doesn't acknowledge the rich resources around them and the cultural capital they bring along. It's very, very interesting way to put in the difficulties that one faces when you go and actually try to do something which has not been done for decades or centuries. So that's why I said that I think my comments are more towards the kind of work that one undertakes when you need to make a big difference into areas which, so basically saying reaching the unreached. So it's very nicely kind of titled. So much on the topic, but coming to the speaker, of course, the speaker is quite well known to all of us, and Asmita has been, in fact, very interesting thing she narrates that it's quite unique, I guess. She has 3 different computer codes running in TIFR because after she finished her MSc in Pune University, she joined NCRA. I think for a few months, and then so therefore she must have had a computer code, and then after that she comes to INO and join as a scientific officer. So she had the second computer code, and then after that she goes to University of Bern, and where she does her PhD in neutrino physics, and come back and join as a postdoc at Home Center for Science Education. She gets her third computer code, so it's quite unique. I don't think any of us have that uniqueness. So much on that. Of course, as I said, she was here for quite a long time working on INO. She made significant contributions, I must say, to the INO project. She was, in fact, the sole person working almost from scratch, the entire simulation framework, along with Professor Govinda Majumdar. And that has been a biggest contribution for INO project even today. All the PhD scholars who passed out from INO project had used and continue to use her code. But then it's a big change from that neutrino physics to her PhD to coming back and working on the topic that she is going to narrate. So without, I think, taking even more time, now I invite Asmita to deliver her research colloquium.
And the other interesting fact I would like to share, when I decided to do physics, I had still just like perhaps before my results were out of 12th standard, I was sitting here with my mother. We had come to meet Mohan Apte, who was giving some lecture on Sunday. So my journey started from TIFR again, and I'm glad that I'm talking with the same audience here. So there's some connect that I shared. In fact, a week back when Satyanarayan asked me, can you fill in the slot which was empty? I was like, within 15 minutes, I said yes. And the reason was not to show you the finished work, but to share with you something that's ongoing and where we can perhaps work together eventually. So that is the idea behind sharing this work. Reaching the unreached. Perhaps something similar sounding things you might hear about neutrinos also, like trying to detect something elusive and all. But this time it's more human. So in post PhD, I mean, I'll try to put it as my journey only to show the change in perspective. I don't see it as glorification of any form. But a person like me who has not seen the world when entered the world, how I started seeing things. So I'll be talking about education in tribal regions of Maharashtra. This is statistics. Most of the students happen to be first generation learners even today. That's like 2023. By first generation, I mean that most of their parents have not gone beyond primary, studied beyond primary. So certainly, people do want their students to be educated even in the remotest corner of India, at least today I'll confine to India. But still, they lack the conducive environment at home because the priorities are different. Often they are caught in hand-to-mouth situations where they had to choose otherwise in spite of getting good marks. 95% of enrollment at primary level is achieved thanks to midday meals and RTE, which ensures that students stay in school for a longer time. But there is a significant dropout, greater than 30%, when they cross that 8th standard boundary, which holds them inside the school. And there certainly this reflects in their low representation in tertiary jobs. So, I started my journey in 2000, a year before pandemic. I went to teach in a school in Gadchiroli, Bhamragarh district of Gadchiroli. So this year I'll give a glimpse of how the situation, I mean, what the culture in that region looks like. So ethnicity, mostly it's Madia, Gond, depending on the region. It's either Madia dominated or Gond dominated. There's a small fraction of Halbi, Orao, and Bangladeshi migrants who migrated, who were like given that place in early 670s. The livelihood is mainly agriculture and they rely heavily on forest produce. Some interesting facts. Early marriage is a concern, but grooms pay money. Groom pay money. I didn't call it dowry because they don't see it as dowry. But if the groom is not able to, pay that dowry, he's made to work in the bride's house for that many proportional number of years. And that is significant, like 4-5 years or plus. And again, like when it comes to education, students are still struggling. So coming to classroom, so what happens in the classroom? What are the challenges before the teacher? It was also first-hand, whatever I've listed here was my first-hand experience, also what I heard from the teachers around. So one, as I said, they belong to different ethnicity. So in spite of being in Maharashtra, Marathi is not their first language, which happens to be their school language. The common complaint from teachers is there's low retention rate, so teachers have to repeat things again and again, even the things we might consider to be simple. The performance, I checked the performance of 3 previous years board results in science. Most of the students had passed with grace marks, and this is before pandemic. And attendance, as I heard later on from other schools, is poor, particularly in June, July, which is the agricultural region. So they lose out on significant fraction when there are more of family responsibilities. So when the regular attendance starts after Pola, that is the festival before Ganpati, where most of the agriculture work is done. And mostly students didn't have exposure to outside world, except for some school picnics, if at all. They have not even reached Chandrapur, which is the closest railway station from the place. So what I was trying to do is, I'd been to explore what are the challenges faced by first generation learners. So I tried to teach them in different ways, like traditional Deliberately, I chose a classroom where I chose didactic methods of authoritative teaching, like teacher teaching the students. Then some remedial classrooms for maths, project-based teaching, where it was more informal. And open schooling is where we met early in the morning before school, 2 hours before schools. And it was more like this was more informal, I said. But my approach throughout was mostly remedial, because I had before me the list of things that they were lacking. So my perspective as a person who has gone from outside, I could quickly see, oh, they are not good at this, they are not good at this. And there was a checklist which was also corroborated by teachers. Yeah. So how is their life back home when they are not in school? So perhaps they live more science when they are back home. And this is what I learned eventually when I started visiting more schools post-pandemic. As soon as I got an opportunity, when the schools reopened, I started visiting schools. This time I tried to visit some really Jilla Parishad and ashram schools, apart from the earlier schools, which was a little well off. So, the data collection was, I was talking to them, questionnaires, interviews, and by then we had also started Anandi newsletter. So in the very first newsletter, we had asked them, what did you do during the lockdown? And they thoroughly enjoyed the lockdown with no regrets, with some of them towards the end mentioned that we do miss school, and slightly with an undertone, they expressed their concern, saying that perhaps all our efforts until now are lost. So that students don't open up as easily about their problems, even if it was a letter. So back home, they were enjoying their life thoroughly. They worked on fields, they observed nature, and they are good at it. We'll see later. They have questions. They are good at hands-on work. This is what, like, after the first, level of interaction with teachers happen. If you nudge them a little more, you will hear all these things from them. Teachers also. And they are good at the culture itself is more collaborative. So they are good at working together. But ironically, the teacher also said that they were not good at understanding classifications. So we, in the questionnaire, we had a question saying, like, what are the topics they find difficult? So this was ironical, because from what they are living in a highly diverse rich biodiversity around them, and they know every bit of it. This is what I had from all these data. And still they were finding the classroom discourse difficult. So why this irony? And that comes from a big disconnect between the two worlds that they are living in. Sometimes the questions that they have do not get answered in the classroom. So there's a complete disconnect. When they come to the classroom, they have science, maths, physics, and subjects within their own silos. So the next phase of the talk would be, what can we do to make science classrooms more responsive to their need, to them, like their interest, I would say, and relevant to their life. Like, it should also be useful, whether they choose to be on farm or choose some good profession. So how do we go ahead with that? Of course, it was about making science education impartial. Now, this impartial word I've taken from H.C. Pradhan, who said that one of his students told him that she find his class, maths class, interesting because he was impartial. I mean, don't know really what that impartial word means, but I liked it, that the science classroom should be impartial and relevant to students, and we'll see what it could mean. So also to students who come from different cultural background than the mainstream, like the ones from the tribal region of Gadchiroli. And sometimes it takes a while to, come to this point. It took me more than 1.5, 2 years to come to this point that they had more with them, that we could use. So the challenge is the children come from distinct culture and regions. Children from distinct culture and regions than mainstream often lack the experiences which the textbook assume, and we don't understand it because we sort of are in it. But on the other hand, their own experiential capitals has no space in classroom discourse, and that is again like, even if it is classification, it's been designed for students who have not seen anything. So on the other hand, these things don't get acknowledgement in the classroom. So how do we bridge the gap? Here I would like to highlight that when I say culture, when we talk about culture in social science, it means looking into the history. But when we speak of culture in science, it would mean looking at present, what's around them. So can we have, the solution would be to have some learning modules, learn as in methods, which will eventually culminate into methods, which are where the context is situated in their own experience. And of course, it should not be a compromise. It should be relevant for them, even if they choose to return to farm or forest or take a mainstream profession. So can we have this bridge between, in between? And there's a body of work done about it, where Geneva Gay talks about making, in US context, being for teachers to be sensitive about Black students or cultural minorities. At the same time, there are efforts also to introduce it in STEM, but we'll be designing it in context of our audience, our target audience. So yeah. So the question would be like, will introducing culturally responsive content improve students' comprehension? Will it make it easier to imbibe concepts? At the end, we want to teach them science and science concepts. And will students' knowledge about, I mean, how do we test it? So they should be able to apply it in their real life situation. That should be the testing point, and not just mugging, as in remembering things. So how do we do that? Of course, like, even if I say I've spent 4 years, I cannot claim to know the culture as well. And so how do we go about doing this? So the idea is have a community of practice where researchers who know their domain well, the teachers who know the students well, and some other educators, like there are NGOs or educational organizations who can also join in. And together they bring along with them their own expertise, and together they'll develop these modules. One thing we learned from experience is students were a great source of information, because at times teachers also don't belong to the community. They are someone who has come from outside. So then starts the venture of exploring the things that we have never tried before. The first step for it was inculcating patience, to see things and to be sensitive, to understand the needs, because it's not that easy. And there should be an active participation to understand the culture, talk to people about it, visit the places. And that's what we started. Now I had a team. Both of them are here. There was one more in the first visit. And we talked to teachers and learned from them. And while we were talking to teachers, we also interacted with students, where we try to understand how they process the information. So it was interesting. Like, I think here she's talking about soil, and here she's talking about Ranbhaja, that I'll be discussing later. So this conversation went on for 30 minutes, and the students told about all the forest vegetation around them, right from its name, its use, its the recipes that they make from it, the medicinal values, as in medicinal usage, whatever they have traditionally, and when the plant grows, how it grows, what time it flowers, when it fruits, size of every part of it. Isn't that what you learn in botany? Something that an undergraduate would struggle. They knew it without any effort. So that was like contradicting the list that I had before, like load retention and all. They were learning this. It was part of their life. And you could see that they think critically also. They would correct each other when they were wrong. And also when we sat in this fashion, it was more, the authoritativeness structure was broken, and they were more open to discussing ideas than just, answering the questions. So yeah, and eventually the objective is to develop a module out of it, which can be used in schools eventually. So for this, who were the participating teacher in the first visit, I had been to different schools and met teachers. So some of the teachers who were already taking efforts. So these things have come from teachers, these ideas have come from teachers, and there are teachers who are already taking efforts. But often what happens in school is they are stuck between syllabus and other exploration, gets limited time. So all these teachers who were taking some effort quickly showed a willingness to participate, and those were the ones who participated in the second phase of studies, where they would sit with us developing the modules. And the participation is voluntary. As I said, methodology, it will be qualitative. We'll try to interview students and teachers before and after implementation of the module. So to summarize, like in the initial phase, I visited schools in Gadchiroli, interacted with teachers, students, and school authorities to understand what the challenges were pre and post pandemic. Then presented this before members of HBCSE, and also started talking to teachers whom I had met, who had shown some interest, and this was presented at Episteme 9. And whatever I discussed now were the findings that were presented. So next was like, I had a team from HBCSE who were willing to work, and with a team of new members, we started there were discussion to instill this sensitivity, because they were again new, as I started like a couple of years back. So we started some discussion sessions, visited Gadchiroli. There was an exploratory visit where we had teachers workshops. So all sat together, identifying the topics that we can cover under this. And the next phase, we sat together. We had regular online meetings with teachers, and we decided it's 2 modules we'll go further with. And this is like, there was another visit in Jan where I could see that the same teachers who had participated had actually helped us take this message to more teachers. So the next visit, we visited all the 5 schools who were participating and spoke to more teachers about this, and the idea was quite welcome. So what we did in the meantime, in the teachers' workshop, we gave teachers paper. We told them, okay, let's start with one context from the student's life, and make a concept, like a concept map like thing, where if I start with soil, what are the other things that come to your mind when you speak of soil? Its physical properties, the constituents, and we'll see this chart later. And eventually connect the school concepts that connect to soil. So similarly, like teachers came up with different topics. One was forest vegetation. Then there was self-help group, which connects to maths. And Mahua is a plant, which is considered to be it's considered to be a holy plant in the region, and it still happens. You'll find it in most of the tribal regions because they, for the reasons they didn't cut it. So that plant is like a kalpataru in analogous to the mainstream, where different parts of it are used. But now, like, most of the usage is obsolete and it's reduced to mahua alcohol, if people have heard of. Then there were also other person from social science background spoke of women empowerment, and for physics we had motions involved in drawing water from well, and this could be extended to cover all forms of motions like translational rotation. So to start with, we decided we'll go ahead with forest vegetation and soil. The idea was to select a topic, map the topics and concepts in the syllabus to it, and then use the existing resources. If they are not available, we'll have to actually go and find them and identify the form of teaching material we'll produce, and something we wanted at the first phase, but we'll continue to get deeper eventually. So what we have had since then is we took forest vegetation because nutrition content in local food that they use is not known. Often the pictures in textbooks are not what they have in their plate. So often they read it, study it, write for the exams, but that's used more often. So how would they know what's going on in the diet? So that was a missing thing. Traditional practice or lack of awareness lead to imbalanced diet and malnutrition. So they eat a lot of a huge variety of it, but they don't know what proportion to eat. Milk is not consumed in that region, and use of forest produce is also like, as I gave in case of as I said in case of Mahua, it's getting obsolete. Just like millets in our case, it was considered to be like very, it started getting obsolete until it's getting revived. And Mahua is almost reduced to liquor. So their life is closely connected to forest and forest produce. And can we connect it to textbook concepts like classification and nutrition? So we decided in phase 1, we will focus on just collecting the data. So, and form a picture dictionary, which can be used, which becomes a document meant for teachers, because often teachers also don't have this information. They collect it from students, teach it, and it stays with the teacher. It doesn't get documented anywhere. And in the phase 2, we will go further to identify nutrient contents in the like minerals, sugar, or fats, and if there could be an activity which can be done at school level, that can also be introduced. Like VP has a module on protein identification. Similarly, we can have something. So in the next visit, in January visit that I mentioned, we talked to a set of students who had worked also as a part of their project. They had herbarium. There was one more girl in this, which was not there present when we took the picture. And it was amazing. Like, okay, what they did for herbarium was they took picture and went to Google Lens, and Google Lens now gives all information. But that certainly did not include the information they had. So to their herbarium, we added columns which will focus on the local usage also. What are the local names? What are the local uses of that material, of that plant? And if there's any medicinal use or any. And students could, like, they just didn't have to remember anything. The discussion went on for an hour without any interruptions. They were telling us things one after the other. And I'm pretty sure you're struggling to find out which of these names you know. And you don't know any of, most of us would not know any of these names. Perhaps Ambadi is something also, there in Vidarbha, so people know it from Ambadi Sarbat. But most of these names are not known, but this is part of their common diet. Students know everything about it, but they are forced to by heart things that they have not seen. So can we have this in the classroom? So students are sharing. Then we made a WhatsApp group, and these are 11th standard students. So they are not our target audience, but we told them, see, whatever you're using is going to help your fellow students. So they started helping us on WhatsApp group. They shared pictures, recipes, and other details of the what plan that they are looking at. They find now. So it starts from May. In rainy seasons, it will have more plants. So these 4 years, 4 months of the year, they have ample of food, which is nowhere in textbooks or classroom. And this is again, this added a new dimension to what we were doing. We had students now, and this work was also part of their project work, classroom projects that they have in 11th and 12th standard. So the idea is like in the first phase, we'll have something like this, where we have more of local information also now, which perhaps Google Lens will also give after some days. And of course, in this, we will also use resources which are already been available. But in the process, while we are doing this, we also try to understand how students are processing it, which vegetables. I mean, we can always get a list of these documents from some university, but that was not the objective. Which are the ones that students you are familiar with was the objective. So this is what it will come up as, and in the first phase. So the next module that I said was soil. And the idea is to connect soil with agri and agriculture and us. So this was based on a module which was part of VP, where soil and its physical characterization is being discussed. And in this module, we'll discuss the presence and importance of minerals in soil and how they get transferred to plants and human beings. And all these things are being taught in classroom, but in a very discrete way, so that students would just not comprehend, like connect it, not even local as well, not even these students or urban students would know how to use that information in their day-to-day life. But these students particularly play more with soil. They are on farms, they dirty their hands. So perhaps this activity would be more close to them. And so can we teach transfer of elements from one form to another in a simple class with a simple classroom activity, and eventually connect it to agriculture, where there's a depletion and enhancement of nutrients from soil, and then connected to crop rotation. And also these are like future things, but simple activities like physical characterization of soil, physical and chemical tests of iron. So almost everyone in Maharashtra knows there is iron in soil, but what does that mean? No one is aware of, because the iron that we see here otherwise is in that solid form. So can a small pinch of soil that we pick up, can we take magnet closer to it and detect the iron content in it? The second interesting thing was, if we take ashes of leaf, here we needed strong magnet, but some part of it did stick to the magnet. So can we show that even the plants absorb iron from the minerals, as in from the soil? What do we mean by iron-rich food? And there were simple tests, like physical test involved checking it with magnet, but a chemical test involved checking it, soaking like soil in the HCl solution, and then adding NaOH solution to it, which would eventually precipitate. And from the color, we can identify what mineral constituents are there in it. So it is a qualitative test, though. So here is it's preliminary, So concept map, we start from oil, we go on, the next level is physical and chemical properties of it, the usage. And as we go on filling this concept map, we see a lot of topics from their syllabus. So these topics on the peripheral are already covered in the classroom. But if we connect the story together, perhaps this would be more interesting, and all the chemistry, physics, a significant part of it can be discussed through this context. And yeah, so one question that often crops up that when we speak of context, as in making it culturally responsive and all this, are we compromising? Are we telling to stay with agriculture or no? But this is what this slide shows is no. Rather, this would demand diving deeper into the subject, and they are more aware of, they have more observables as to what happens when certain things come together or no. I have not touched soil. I'm not used to touching soil as much, even if we are working on this. So for them, this would be more relevant, but certainly there's no compromise in it. All the topics are covered. How we further introduce in the classroom, it could be a project-based thing which students do over a year. And one of the concerns that teachers have is, are the syllabus topics covered? So that's what we are trying to show here. So after the modules are ready, we will go for pre-test and post-test interviews. And later on, it would be like share the set of teachers we have working on this together with us will also act as resource persons. We'll take it to other teachers. That's the plan. So yeah, in the next phase, probably we'll try to include physics and maths topics also, and extend the topics that we're already working on to the next level, as I discussed. In the first case, it will be extended to nutrition, and in the second case, it would be extended to usage in agriculture, connecting it to agriculture. So this is one project that I'm working on, and we are working on at HBCSE. The second project is Anandi. I'm sure you must have heard the name, some of you at least. And this is a science communication where stories it's a science plus communication where we try to communicate with students science in simple language, a language which is easy to understand. Okay, so what was the vision behind? It was started with a vision to reach the last person first. So the places that I talked about, most of the villages do not have textbook. And this was pointed out to me by one of my, the person I had met in during one of my trip. And she said, did you notice there are no signboards or nothing, no text around that you would just read while passing? A student told me that during a pandemic, that there were barely four, and this is one of the village where there are more graduates compared to others, that they barely had 4 and 5 books in their village, and all of them, she's done reading. And she was a voracious reader. She wanted to read more. So before the next pandemic, before the next break, when there was a short time when the school had opened, she brought a set of Sadhana Masik. Those who know what Sadhana Masik is, it's not easy to read for a 15-year-old. She took 25 of Sadhana Masik from one of the teacher. And the next time she called me, she said, I have enough for the next lockdown. So even in these villages, there are students with all the interest that we see elsewhere. But there is no access to these paper also. Also, in most of the remote places, there is no network in remote regions. Things are changing, but how much? I mean, It's often closer to the main road, you get network, but as you go to the interiors, it's still not that good. Also, when they are in school, the access to also when they are in school, they often have like 1 or 2 PCs with internet. So, and the set of 300 students, they're sharing it over the week. So you can imagine what time they get on it. And the dropout rate. Anandi is Marathi. Yeah. That's our limitation because we don't know the other languages. And post-pandemic, the situation was majority of the students were losing interest in reading and writing. And it was foreseen that there'll be a huge dropout rate. So we needed to connect with students in some way. So Anandi, as is seen, is a channel between HBCSE, which is an education center, which has huge amount of work related to education done, and student. It's an 8-page newsletter. You can check, some of them are kept here. You can check it later on. So it's an 8-page newsletter in which there is a 4-page response sheet, which students can send us back in a return envelope, which is a business envelope. So they don't have to pay for it. It's a 4-page sheet and 8 pages of this newsletter. We tried to optimize the price so that we can reach out to individual students. It reaches out to students because when it reaches out to one student, it means people in their houses would also read it. And I've got feedback from that. My sister got it and I read it. It was good. So that was also the reason why there's an effort to make it reach one person. And the context is local, thanks to all the studies that are happening and also other activities at HBCSE where we connect to school. The local context could be incorporated into it. And it's we chose regional language because it was a matter of human resource. Like at HBCSE, we have more people who can speak Marathi than any other language. So it has variety of articles on various topics like astrophysics, biology, and maths. And we try different styles of writing, creative writing, making it easy to read. And the major effort goes on deciding the examples. So over the time, our team eventually, major part of editing was to tell that, no, these examples perhaps would not work. Let's change it. So why the hell would this not work? And eventually the team started telling me that perhaps this will not work. Let's change. So that is how it continued. So this is always a concern. Are we reaching? So yes, we don't have any prescribed model for how it should be implemented in classroom. We just send it because sometimes that becomes a hurdle. If we tell teachers, no, you have to do it in a certain way. If they don't want it, it will just not happen. So, but teachers came up with their ways. There was some use it as for bi-monthly Anandi meeting. So they call students once to distribute it and collect response, and next time they come meet in the month where they discuss if they had any questions or so. Some have collective reading sessions, students discuss among themselves, or some just distribute it to students and students are on their own. And the impact is certainly more when, from the responses, we can see that the impact is more when there's someone mediating in between, when there is a teacher. So, yeah, it's interesting to read, get a letter. It helps us know from students. And there are almost 200 to 300 responses per month. Of course, they can be classified into the responses sheet has questions, which is designed. The questions are designed not to check if students have understood what's written, like the answers aren't in the text, but to see if the students can connect that whatever is being discussed with their surrounding. So we have got blank responses also. I don't know how to decode it, but we have got those. And mass responses where the whole classroom writes the same story, even if it's about their dream. So that's also an interesting thing. Everyone had the same ambition, everyone had the same incident at their home. But then you can find out who has written the first. So, so you all know how to find out that those things, perhaps more. So exam style of response, they think that, there's a question sheet given along with 8 pages. So the answer has to be somewhere. So they just copy paste somewhere where they find familiar words into this. So they write the same things. And that's not their fault. I mean, we have to rethink about why they are doing this also. So all these responses are telling us something. And there are some are bonding. They go beyond and tell their stories, and you connect to those students. Some rewrite, some tell that, oh, I've been reading all these whiles, but I'm writing for the first time. So it's really nice. It's very one-to-one conversation. And some have got the hack of the game. They know what we are asking for, and they tell us more than how they connected to their surroundings. And then they are like, they of course talk good about it. Like it's it takes us to a different world. It develops interest. It's developing interest in science. So this, I think, is prompted, and eagerly waiting for the next issue. But they also tell, please make it interesting. It's getting boring. And I agree, because we don't have those small things, games and puzzles, which students expect from a magazine. So we get those messages also from students. Of course, behind the scenes is we want to ensure that there you'll still find mistakes, but we want to ensure that there is no technical mistake in it. Language is taken care of, is perfect. So there are 3 levels of reviewing. There's content reviewing, structural editing, integrating illustration, and a lot goes on behind the scene from the blank sheet, getting the final display out, final master PDF out. And there's language proofreading. And these are the pillars of our Anandi team, where people from different expertise come together, are contributing into it. We have rigorous, what is it helping us in behind? So we have rigorous discussions towards making the subject content inclusive. Most of us, when we started, didn't know like what was happening there, but it is through stories and narrating. Some of us who have been there talk about it. And we are trying to see how we can expand our boundaries. It's giving us a platform to practice it there and then. And it's these learnings, each one of us is taking to our respective research domain also. So that is what Anandi is giving each one of us. It's a collaborative design. It's a team of 15 plus members. I mean, there are more than what I've listed there. And authors from outside outside HBCSE have also started contributing articles. So any one of you who wants to write, you're most welcome. And NGOs are helping us extending the reach, because they are who are associated with some schools. They are helping us reach more. And we are also developing resource material in the form of small booklets, which could be shared eventually. So it's a collaboration. And a story I like to narrate. While working the whole narration up until now was, I started with, I know it all. And then we saw that we had a lot to learn from them. But the more and more you get into it, you see there's more to learn. And one of it is ethics. So this is Mahua plant. And I was passing by this plant where you see this part has been cleared out. And I asked the person who I was on a bike and he was taking me from one place to other. What has been done? So he said the person who will pluck the flowers tomorrow has cleaned the place before. And I said, what if someone else comes in? I think that will not happen. The forest is free, but the flowers belong to the person who has cleaned the space. And this is what collaboration and ethics is ingrained in their culture. I don't know if if there's a threat of any uh, some policing of any sort, but perhaps not. It's so ingrained. You experience it when you're with those students. So outlook for Anandi would be to make the collaborative design robust so that everyone has to, contribute little amount of time, because for a place like HBCSE, this is a perpetual thing. It should have a magazine of this sort, which reaches out to students. And we'll try to involve more teachers' participation, creative communication, workshop for students, if possible. Like, these are just ideas. And so what is the way forward? So after the whole discussion, most of the focus until now was a group of students, age group, grade from 8 to 10. But eventually, the scenario beyond that is not good. And that is where I think this place can contribute more. So I would like to extend it to 11th and 12th grade in coming years, mainly focusing on physics experiments. And the challenges would be different and the approach will also be different. The last word and the reason why I accepted 3 minutes I have. So last word and the reason I accepted Satyanarayan's invite for this opportunity rather was, this is June, and most of the students, after all the struggle they are going through, will be stepping out. Some of them will be stepping out of that world. But what comes as a welcome to them is first a cultural shock. Some do manage to reach to cities like Pune, Mumbai, and Nagpur. They do have fear quite early on. At 10th standard, having the fear that will I be able to do is a bit early to handle for themselves. And then to top up that, there is social bullying that's going on. And I think I cannot discuss all these things without a word on it, that we have to work on it together. We can pinpointing that one person would not be enough. So they are, most of these students who reach out to cities and big cities are first few in their villages to be like the first graduate, first person to cross 12th standard. And so we should be more welcoming to them in a better way. So yeah, it was a road, I felt it was a road less traveled, but it was not. I found many along the way. And this work wouldn't have happened if I had not met many people. During my first trip, I met Educate Gadchiroli Fellows. It was a team of fresh graduates who had come to work in Gadchiroli. And we accidentally met. They started inviting me to their schools, arranging the stay there. And they took Anandi first to the remotest village of Gadchiroli. The administrations to give me access to schools. Teachers' cooperation, some are also participating in the project, but even other teachers. There are friends and mentors working for the cause, giving their precious time for discussion. And Anandi team and cultural responsive pedagogy team at HBCSE. Both I would like to thank. Of course, no project can happen without the institutional support. And Arnab is not just institutional support, he's also part of Anandi. So he pushed Anandi, and it's possible because of him. Dean was always there, like, whatever you're doing is good. Like, so she had those encouraging words. In faculty, Aniket Sure is my mentor at HBCSE, and Ankush Gupta has helped in culturally responsive pedagogy with soil modules, discussion on it, because I don't have chemistry background. So, of course, for Anandi, we had to run to all these departments, and they were always very helpful. And last but not the least, to Satyanarayan sir for giving me this opportunity to talk about this work and this platform to talk to you. Thank you very much. I think I took 15 minutes more, but at 5, I lost that. It was.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Asmita. I have a lot of comments to make, but I think I won't take time because I see quite a few hands raising. I'll start with Amol. But just hold on for a while.
So,
So just two quick questions. Are the schools still standard 10th or 12th? And secondly, are the teachers from the same region or do they come from outside?
so the 9 schools that I visited, it was accidental, but they covered all variety of schools. There was Jila Parishad school in it, there was ashram schools in it, and there was public-private partnership schools in it. Except private school, all variety of school where there is some public aspect to it were covered in that first 9 schools, including JNV. Apart from that, across Gadchiroli, ashram schools are there, which are more populous in that region, it being tribal region, where it's a residential school where children from almost 40 kilometers around that place can come and study. Some schools are up to 10 standards, some schools are up to 12 standards. So they have junior college attached to it, but not all would have it. And then there are other like Jila Parishad schools who have some hostel associated with it, where some students can stay, but it's a day school where students don't stay. And when it comes to teachers, unfortunately, like most of the teachers are coming from peripheral districts, some from the Gadchiroli, but from the better parts of Gadchiroli. North is better off than the southern part of Gadchiroli. So teachers are coming. There are more teachers from there. But so they like North is mostly Marathi speaking, so they wouldn't know Maria and other language. And even the cultural, they know as outsiders and not like insiders of that community.
In one of your slides, you mentioned about WhatsApp groups which you had created, in which you exchange messages and pictures of the vegetables and the recipes. So I wanted to know, do they have access to Android phones?
So the students that I said, like 5 students who are participating in it are 11th and 12th standard students. So the first thing that you buy after 10th these days is a smartphone. Whether they can afford it or no is a different thing. What fraction of students will have it is some stats I don't have. Whether they have network throughout is another thing, but they'll have a smartphone. That's the first purchase these days.
Okay, so that's interesting. Means they know the value of having this communication device. Their families, that is. And they make that investment.
Yeah, it is. I mean, see, indispensability and heavy reliance on this is also sometimes putting pressure on parents. So those things it varies from family to family, but I also know stories where, they wanted it because they thought it was important. So it's a burden on the family sometimes. Having it for every child is not that easy. And sometimes in these classrooms also, some of the students have it who are better off. So not all of them would have.
Okay, I have 2 questions. One is this dropouts from the school. That rate is it higher in the middle school and high school compared to primary school, or it doesn't really matter?
It matters in a reverse way. In primary, see, midday meal is a big thing and it's hard to digest, but that's something that the school will take care of for that many years. So until that student doesn't have a say, parents would want them to stay in the school. So that's
Because-
also a reason why students stay in school. It has the positive part of it. And then the dropout rate is more where,
working hand.
RT is also not holding them. Okay. And they are failed. So what would they do?
But mainly, I think high school kids must be the working hands for them. So that's also
That's also one of the reasons. So when they go home, they get caught in a different world,
Okay.
and coming back becomes difficult at times. Sometimes it's also out of disinterest, sometimes out of family responsibilities. And other part, like when it comes to ashram schools, where this child can stay up till 10th standard, they continue to stay up till 10th standard, but then you see a dropout after 10th. So that is also there.
Second question is about these languages, the other languages which you say. Do they have separate scripts?
No.
So if it is the language written still in the Devanagari script, they will be able to read it and understand it better.
See, it's not written anywhere. It's a spoken language. So some groups are taking efforts to preserve the language and document it. So
if you really want to take it to these students who speaking different languages, then the audio scripts or audio book may be a better option.
Okay, so perhaps perhaps that's a new thing. Well, some have also used when with these languages, often it happens that whatever the closest state language is, they tend to take language. So if there's a Orao tribe is in Orissa, so there are more scripts written there. So they don't use Marathi or Devanagari. And it's a spoken language. Again, having audio, you should have the gadget to listen to the audio also. And there are few efforts taken to preserve the language. So whether it's audio or script, it's still in that nascent phase that these languages are being preserved. But students do speak those languages at home. Again, like it was surprising in Gadchiroli, I found that they are good at those languages. But when I was visiting Kesla, that's in Madhya Pradesh, and the girl was from a Korku community. So like it was perhaps second or third generation in school. So she didn't know Korku. So yeah, it would get obsolete eventually. And these efforts are also to be made.
If I can just respond to that, one of Asmita's core philosophies has been to keep it as simple as possible. And I think the simplest thing which originated during the pandemic was a simple printed newsletter. Audiobooks, podcasts, all that just require much more hardware and much more resources that are difficult to get in places when you go really off net. Not off road, but off net.
Partly you started talking about, which was that other than Gadchiroli, are there similar works either done by you or others? And how does the experience compare? Or does HBCSE have a plan of taking it to other tribal areas?
So, see, HBCSE started off with work in tribal regions. So it's not something that we started off now. And there's a lot of work done in HBCSE itself along these lines. About other organizations, yes. I try to visit other organizations, other places. So if you go to Palghar, a lot of things can be replicated, and you see that are as applicable. Some part of Palghar, which is tribal dominated. So at least the topics that we have chosen now aren't as localized, and they can be as much applicable to Nandurbar or Palghar, as well as any other tribal regions in Maharashtra, at least. For other places, I don't know the demography as much. But yeah, there are many people, organizations working for it also. But we have that extra advantage of being on the research part of it, and it doesn't limit. It's not restricted to data collection or stuff. But we can look at it deeper.
Okay. So before I come, so Alak, are you there?
Yes,
Yeah, please go ahead and ask your question.
I have one question and I have one comment also. In fact, the comment, let me just come to the comments part, which actually perhaps will also lead to a question. You mentioned in a response to Amol, the kind of teachers that you have in your interaction group. Now, in a relatively remote village in the riverine islands of Sundarban, located in West Bengal, we found that many of the schools were actually government-supported schools, and the teachers there were being part of the entire West Bengal, educational system. They were subject to transfers. They would be transferred from, not only that district to a completely different place. And also that some of the teachers were actually trying to commute from relatively nearby, but still fairly distant places where they live, and to the places that they teach. As a result, there was some kind of a disconnect between, the people who are being taught and the teachers themselves. So, did you find any of this kind of problem there? Perhaps not so much, because you seem to be having more of a mix of different types of schools, not just only government-supported schools. That's number one. It's a question and a comment. The other, I have a real question, is in one of the slides on soil, you showed various different elements, and in one corner there was also animals. And Gadchiroli is generally a forested area, and so the students as well as the inhabitants must be also going and collecting forest resources. And so, do you have any kind of module that connects to forest produce and animals, man-animal conflicts, which are actually very relevant in other parts of India like Sundarban? And I was also very, very heartened by your reference to the ethics of collaboration and ethics of enough is actually implied in there. You collect only how much you're sort of socially bound by what is enough, and not, you're not doing this for profit of external organizations. So can you comment upon especially these two aspects, these two things with regard to my question?
Yeah. So to answer your first question about transfer of teachers, that is a big thing when it comes to government teachers. I think ZP also has it, and ashram schools definitely have it. So teachers get transferred to different places. Perhaps it's within the district, but still within the district also things change a lot. So one of the reasons for making this documentation is when we talk to teachers, the teachers we have now in our group are the ones who have been taking efforts. And it is always like, you spend some time taking efforts and then you're transferred to some other place. New person comes and they have to start from scratch. So if these things are documented, it becomes resource for other teachers. And someone who will learn it eventually would know it from starting. So that's how this project will help to address this problem. So transfer is definitely an issue here as well. When it comes about your other question about human-animal conflicts, so in the module we had animals because I had said Mati, Sheti and Apan. So what is the role of iron in our body? Apan, like human, we know that anemic means low hemoglobin, and that's to do with iron, which is the carrier of oxygen. So there we saw, like, again, these topics are covered in discrete way, but we can just connect them together in one necklace. Say. So that's where the context of animal came in that chart. About human-animal conflict, it's certainly there in this region also. This reminds me of a story which was narrated in one of the Anandi response itself. But personally, I don't know much about it. And so I don't know how it can be taken to classrooms and all. But certainly, like right now, we started with Ranbhajya. Something similar can be done with animal diversity also. The reason we chose these topics were because she has chemistry background and she has biology. Otherwise, I would have picked up some physics thing. So,
Thank you.
thanks. There was third question which I forgot. What was it?
About ethics of enough and ethics of collaboration.
So that is something, when you go to that region, you hear stories about it. I'll also add, tell one more. So in my house in Alibag, we have mango trees and we have to pluck up the mangoes raw because they are not going to stay on the plant. And then, take care of it at home. But there, I heard the story, I had not seen this. A visitor from here, was visiting the place and he saw that tree loaded with mangoes and he wondered, how could you let it stay? And usually this is deemed to be lazy. They are lazy, so they are not working. But it's not that. They have some ceremonious thing, which is when the mango has started ripening and then they collect it, they eat it together. And there are also stories where they say they'll never fill their pockets. They'll eat what's there on the tree and leave things behind. So these are the things which make you question that who is primitive. We justify competition is more evolved version or than collaboration, but they are more good at these things.
Okay. We take two questions. I think one is you have one there, and then get one to probably answer.
Do the schools have midday meal program and midday meal program?
Yeah.
And if they do, then is it basically the food is more local, or what is the food like?
Well, I have not checked that, so I can't really comment. But I don't know would be the answer. Because in big schools, I don't know if forest produce and all, how much they can, cater to big
No, is there rice and wheat?
Huh?
In the food, rice and wheat, because it is supported by the government programs.
Meat.
Wheat, rice and...
rice and wheat would be there.
Okay.
Yeah. Meat is...
Yeah, just to respond to what Rajdeep asked earlier. So Asmita mentioned in one of the slides that our present reach is about 6,400 copies, and that is 60 schools in about 12 districts. So as Asmita's interest was more about Gadchiroli and the other project about cultural responsibility, it started from there. But then we got requests from many other schools from many other areas. So we have some schools from Palghar side. We have then some colleagues of Medha Vatkar heard about this. So we have some schools from Narmada Bachao Ashram Shalas. There are also some schools from Hingoli side, some schools from Ratnagiri Sindhu side. So, right, about 6,000 copies. We
she joined about 2 years back, and that time obviously we did not have a scope to ask for separate money for a new project. So we are managing through the existing resources. So that is why we are not expanding a lot at this moment. Maybe next phase we can do we can reach to more schools.
So Datar, do you have a question?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. So I think more questions. So once again, let us thank Asmita for a wonderful lecture, and more importantly, also, as he said, it's a road that she was in some sense laying new road to
Well,
such kind of
I
an
thought
interesting
so,
thing.
but it wasn't
But
the case.
we all wish her all the best in our let us say efforts, and one for a wonderful talk.
Thank you.
This is a memento commemorating
cherish.
40 years of asset, and you give a
It
talk.
was the right time to give a talk.
Thank you so much for
To get a
everyone.
good moment.
Okay, he wants to take a picture. Thank you. And please join for a cup of coffee at West End.
Anandi here.
Yeah, sorry. I forgot.
Also.
Okay.
So you definitely give us feedback about this. And if you have any schools in mind where Anandi can be sent, right now we.
Aniket.
Yeah, sorry. If you have any more schools in mind where Anandi can be sent, we can't support more resources from HBC side, but we have allowed this another model where we are asking alumni of different schools to support subscription, sending issues to that school. So if they, I think Asmita mentioned that our expense is at cost is about 200 rupees per student for a year. So if you say that okay, 2,000 rupees are given to HBCSE, we will say make sure that 10 copies are sent to that school for a year, and so and in as multiple.
Very nice.